Hi Econ students, Mr. Abbott here, and I want to go over lesson 4 today. This is a longer lesson, one of our longer ones. It's called Robinson Crusoe Economics. Now Robinson Crusoe was this character that a guy wrote a book about, and by the way, there's construction going on behind me. My neighbors are building a house, so if you see some of that, that's what's going on. Robinson Crusoe was this character that a guy wrote a book about, and he was stuck on an island by himself. Now, as I think about that, I also think of a movie that was made in about the year 2000 called Castaway with Tom Hanks, and he was same deal, a guy on a desert island by himself. Now, why this is important is we've been talking about how people have purposeful actions. And it's people, not things, that act and that make decisions and so on, rather than mindless behavior. There's a purpose. And we learned in the last lesson about preferences, that people will make decisions based on things that they prefer, all right? So the best way to see some of the principles of economics, since we can't really study millions of people who are exchanging goods and services back and forth, what we can do is we can look at one man on an island and how he has this exchange with nature, how he values, how he prioritizes things. So let me just kind of walk through the book here, the chapter. First it talks about Robinson Crusoe has to learn how to economize. He's on an island, and he has to take inventory of goods and services that are available to him. And the author talks about how he has to figure out what's useful to me now and what's not so useful. Coconuts are useful to him at the moment. He might want to eat other things, but until he can find those other things, he puts a value on coconuts, okay? He doesn't really worry about air and necessarily oxygen, because those things are not scarce, those things are around and so on. But he looks at the things that he absolutely needs to have. He needs to take stock of what is useful to him. He doesn't really have fish. There's probably fish, but right now coconuts are available. So then he has to prioritize, and there's a thing called trade-offs. Trade-offs are when you decide that there's something else of greater value at the moment, and so you'll put off the one thing to do the other or to acquire the other, and that's kind of a trade-off, and that's what it means to economize. All right? And so they're talking about this. And then there's this thing about consumer goods versus producer goods. Consumer goods, by definition, consumer goods are those things that we consume, and they're useful to us, all right? Coconuts are a consumer good for Robinson Crusoe because he can eat them and feel really good about them. A stick, on the other hand, is a producer good because it means that it helps him produce more of something. So a stick can help him knock down coconuts out of a tree, and therefore it's a producer good. Unless, like the illustration on page 53, you're the Incredible Hulk, and you can take the stick, you can get the coconuts on your own, and you can take the stick and scratch your back, then the stick becomes a consumer good. But for our purposes here, consumer goods are those things that satisfy ourselves. Producer goods are those things that help us acquire those things that satisfy ourselves. So producer goods are those things then that satisfy our wants and our needs. Okay, producer goods are the things that create the things that satisfy our needs, okay? So, land, labor, and capital goods. Now, when you get into economics, there's this thing that you're going to learn later on that we call the factors of production. Land, labor, capital, entrepreneurship. And land and labor come from natural resources around us, all right? And the natural resources around us help us to create things. Labor. Our labor is actually a factor of production. Our labor counts towards towards the value of producing things, okay? You can have the land, you can have all the natural resources, but you need the labor. You need somebody to do the work, to work it out. And so land and labor are part of what we call the factors of production, the ability to produce something. Okay, that's what we mean by the factors of production. What are the factors? What are the things that it takes to produce? You got to have land, you got to have natural resources, you have to have labor. And Robinson Crusoe has all these natural resources available. He has the labor, his willingness to work, all right? And then capital. Capital goods. Again, capital goods, those are the things that we create, which then in turn help us to make consumer goods, all right? So your book talks about that. Then the chapter deals with investment, or income, saving, and investment. And it's that whole understanding of knowing when to save for a rainy day, all right? So, you know, they talk about Robinson Crusoe. He's knocking down these coconuts. He figures out that it takes him like a day to knock down 10 coconuts, and therefore that's quite a day's work. And then it goes through the illustration of he would really like some leisure time. So then he figures out, hey, you know what? And he consumes 10 coconuts a day, okay, to maintain everything. But then he figures out he needs some leisure time, some downtime, and so he figures out that if he only consumes 8 coconuts, then he has 2 coconuts per day times 7 days. That's 14 coconuts that he's got stockpiled later on. So maybe, okay, so, you know, so for the coconuts, he figures out by consuming less per day, then he can stockpile some and save them, so that then maybe there's one day he can rest a little bit more and still have some coconuts to eat. Or so maybe he'll do this. He stockpiles some coconuts because he eats less per day than what he really should. And then he takes a day where he goes off and he doesn't gather any coconuts, but he's walking through the island, around the island, and he's acquiring things, and he's acquiring things to build a place of safety. He's acquiring things to, he's able to create a tool where he can knock down coconuts at a faster rate. Okay? Now follow along. So while he's creating these useful tools to help him be more productive with gathering coconuts, he's taking his coconuts out of his stockpile that he saved up, okay, that he didn't consume. And so there's a trade-off there, and it's that whole idea of choosing and prioritizing so that later on he can create more value. And what he's doing is he took some time off, he saved up for that time of gathering things, so he's consuming coconuts out of his savings, out of his stockpile, but he's able to create tools where he can gather coconuts more coconuts more quickly in less time, which then down the road gives him more leisure time, okay, to do other useful things, and to have time to maintain the equipment, because the equipment is going to wear out. That's called depreciation. The equipment's going to wear out, and so he does need to allocate some time to maintaining his equipment. But the fact that he can now gather, because he took some time off, he saved, he took some time off, he created equipment so he could gather coconuts more quickly in less time, then he's able to, with his time, have some leisure time, have some time to maintain his equipment, and still gather coconuts. And so that's income, savings, investment. That's what we call trade-offs. And that's where the author is kind of talking about what depreciation. There's one last, some last term here called marginal utility and opportunity cost. Marginal utility is, economists use that term to measure the benefit if I have one more thing, okay? If I experience pleasure by having one more thing, then that's called marginal utility. So it's going by having one more unit of something, it brings me greater satisfaction. And so That's marginal utility, and he talks about this here in the Robinson Crusoe. We'll read through that together. And then, of course, there's opportunity cost. There's benefits and cost, opportunity cost. Again, it kind of like trade-offs. What's the opportunity cost? You know, what's the benefit or what's the opportunity cost by acquiring this one thing? And so they talk about Robinson Crusoe. I can tell you that, like, opportunity cost. Here in my at my place here, where we've been doing a lot of remodeling, this new house of ours that you've heard me talk about, the opportunity cost and benefit. We lose power. This is out in the country, so we lose power quite a bit here. So I have been thinking about purchasing, and I'm going to do this today, a generator, and it's a whole house generator. It backs up the whole house. You hook it up to your natural gas or your propane, which is what powers it, and then what happens is if you lose power in your house, the generator kicks on. If it detects a loss of power, the generator kicks on, and you continue to have power even though the electricity all around you is out. You're able to generate power. So a generator like that is pretty expensive, and I've been saving up, and I have the money to buy it, and so it's a lot of money, and I don't know if I want to part with the money. But the benefit, because it's costly, but the benefit of knowing that when I'm gone and my wife and my mother, who's 88, is here in our house, and I'm gone at school, I'm out reffing, and they're here and there's a loss of power, what a reassurance to know that there won't be a loss of power, because the generator will kick on and they'll be able to continue on as normal until power is restored. And so that's a benefit. So that's that's an example of a benefit. Robinson Crusoe in the story has other things. I'm just giving you one that's really personal with me. So that's what we mean by cost, benefits, and opportunity cost. Paying that much for a generator, it's opportunity cost. What's the opportunity? The peace of mind knowing that my mom and my wife won't be in a dangerous situation, because when you're out here, if you don't have power, you don't have water, because we have a well, and you need power to get water out of the well. We don't have heat. I mean, we have nothing. So great peace of knowing, and that's what we mean by opportunity cost. All right. So those are pretty much. So the lesson recap is understanding that here on one man on an island, you can see all the principles of economics that we all experience in the marketplace with individuals. Here we can see it with one man on an island and with his exchange with nature back and forth. And so that's the big picture of this chapter, and I hope that will make sense to you as we read through it. Please, this lesson is longer and therefore has a lot of terms. We'll probably spend 2 days reading through this together and discussing it. All right? So I hope that's helpful, and I hope you're enjoying the class. And this is all part of the foundations. And then next week, after we take our first test, then we're going to get into talking about some real economic thoughts about the free market. All right? And we'll always apply this foundation principles to those topics as well. So we're going to this is going to pick up, and I hope become even more interesting, and you're really going to enjoy it. So have a great rest of the week, and we'll talk to you later.